Homily for the 25th Sunday of the year B. Greatness through service. Our readings for this Sunday are from Wisdom chapter 2 verse 12 and 17 to 20. James chapter 3 verse 16 to chapter 4 verse 3. And the Gospel of St. Mark chapter 9 verse 30 to 37. The first reading from the book of Wisdom is an illustration of the wicked plans that godless people often concoct to torment the innocent, the God-fearing in their midst. They include false accusations, blackmail, cruel treatment, and eventually condemnation to death. In the second reading, St. James declares that the wisdom that comes from above makes for mutual love and peaceful coexistence, whereas jealousy and inordinate ambition are the cause of disharmony and wicked things of every kind. In the Gospel passage, Jesus emphasizes for his followers the message of the greatness that comes through service. At a time when the disciples were arguing who among them was the greatest, Jesus insisted that, quote, if anyone wants to be first, he must make himself last and servant of all, unquote. Jesus predicts his passion and death again. We saw in the Gospel of the 24th Sunday how Jesus presented himself as the suffering servant who would be rejected, humiliated, and killed. Following this prediction of his passion, Jesus asked his followers to take up their own crosses daily if they truly wish to follow him. Now, as he travels to Jerusalem to face the impending suffering and death, and anxious to make his disciples understand the meaning of what lies ahead, he makes another pronouncement of his passion. See Mark chapter 9 verse 31. He once again contradicted their understanding of his identity and mission. Up to this point, the disciples understood him to be simply a miracle worker and a political messiah, and they saw themselves as privileged companions and possible successors of a very powerful personality. He shocked them again by predicting his passion and death. Who is the greatest? Even after predicting his suffering and death the second time, the disciples still did not understand his real mission. They started discussing among themselves who was the greatest, who was the most important, and who should occupy the highest position. Their discussions soon grew into a heated argument which attracted Jesus' attention. And when asked what generated the argument, they kept silent in shame. This is because the discourse was driven by the kind of selfishness and inordinate ambition that St. James wrote about in today's second reading. They showed how little they had learned and how poorly they understood Jesus' mission. Embracing the little child. Jesus brought out a child and set before them. He challenged them to welcome the little child in its powerlessness, its weakness, its meekness, and vulnerability. Children are unpretentious and they are open to new learning. Children are incapable of plotting, scheming, and conspiring or conniving to deceive or betray others. Jesus likens himself and his kingdom to that little powerless child who cannot resort to power tactics when threatened or maltreated. That little child who cannot defend himself or herself, and whose only protection and defense is in the Father. Jesus' complete trust in his Father makes him vulnerable like a little child. He told his disciples in a very clear terms that unless they embrace the vulnerability of the child, they cannot be his followers. In putting the child before his disciples, Jesus challenges us to welcome the powerlessness of the little child as the way to the kingdom, to relate with the Father with the openness and trust of a little child, and to take to heart the weakest and the neediest members of the community. To recognize that power, privilege, and prestige are not the model of Christian discipleship, but rather vulnerability, service, and sacrifice. He wants us to understand that true greatness consists in being the last and the servant of all. The widespread craving for power and prestige. Like the disciples of old, we too are often plagued by inordinate ambition. We often desire to be honored, to be the center of attention and attraction, to rule, to control, to dominate, or lord it over others, and to have others serve us. This is why the prosperity gospel is so attractive in the modern day. But these inordinate ambitions, according to St. James, spring from the conflicts of selfishness and greed, as well as the blind lust for power in the human heart. St. John admonishes believers in 1 John chapter 2, verse 16 to 17, not to love the things of the world, because all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of riches, they come not from the Father, but from the evil one. Yes, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of riches come not from the Father, but from the evil one. The selfish desire for wealth, power, and popularity often results in the ruthless and aggressive competition that destroy human beings, human relationships also. The desire for these things often bind us to the world of violence rather than to the God of peace. See James chapter 4, verse 4. As they bring about conflict and division, oppression of the innocent poor, persecution of the just, as well as the violence of war. St. Paul declares to Timothy that the love of money is the root of all evils. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10. Who really is the greatest? Against the false ideas making the rounds about Jesus' identity and mission, we are presented once again with the ideal of the suffering servant, whose life is characterized by humility and service, and exemplified in the cross of Calvary. Jesus teaches that his followers should be ambitious for true greatness, which is not to be found in being master of others, but in being servant of others. And service rendered to the least human beings is the best service of all services. See Matthew chapter 25, verse 31 to 46. The truly great and the happiest of people are therefore not those who seek to further their own interests, but those who devote their lives to serving the interests of others. Jesus confronts the worldly logic of wealth, prestige, power, and control to which many have enslaved themselves with the heavenly wisdom of the greatness that comes through humble service. He makes it clear that his own kingdom is not about seeking honor and glory for oneself, but about serving others and promoting their dignity, security, and comfort. Only those who are prepared to serve others, to wash others' feet, and to die for others will get to the top position in Jesus' kingdom. God bless you.